AM 1220 KHTS HometownStation.com. I am T. I am here with you for the next hour with Dr. Proctor. This is an opportunity for us to kind of peek over the shoulders of the medical community and professionals to see what it is they're doing on our behalf, learn a little bit about what's happening out there, helping us become our own best health advocates. I've talked before about the idea that they say there's a silver tsunami coming as the population ages. We've had a lot of changes in our healthcare system where hospitals and doctors are impacted now. One of the best things we can do for ourselves is to take care of ourselves, but having that window into the world of what is happening out there helps us be better educated and be just a little bit healthier. One of my guests today is Dr. Jessica Schulman. Now, I am a big fan of what it is we put in our body to be as healthy as possible. And Dr. Schulman, Jessica Schulman, PhD, she is an author, credentialed registered dietitian, nutritionist, and lactation educator who holds a doctorate in health behavior and recently completed a master's degree in clinical psychology. Now, unless you think that's far too much information, I can tell you from personal experience, a long, long history, that what we eat, how we eat, it's so much more than just the food we put in our body. It's our relationship to us also. And the book, one of the books that Dr. Schulman has is Relational Nutrition, which is the psychology and attachment of eating behavior. She has another book called Nutrition in Sickness and in Health, because after all, we are sort of, our own best partners. You can learn more about her at mynutritionspecialist.com, and you can get her books on Amazon, and we'll talk a little more about that in a little bit. Dr. Schulman, thank you for being here today.
Thank you for having me.
Now, one of the things I'm so excited to learn about you and read through your book, which I am still finishing, but one of the things that I found so appealing is the idea that it really truly is, and you'll talk more about the multi-pronged relationship we have to eating, just the psychology of how we eat. And one of the things I'd like to start with today is it's developing healthy eating habits and snacks, because when snacks aren't the most evil thing. A lot of people go, oh, don't snack. Some people, that's a requirement. But what we put in our body that provides appropriate nutrition and energy is apparently, more than just my opinion, for some, it's a challenge. Because according to the people who count this kind of thing, who count the beans, more than 2/3 of the United States population is considered to be obese, which in and of itself isn't the worst thing until you realize obesity puts you at risk for several health conditions: type 2 diabetes, high blood pressure, stroke, heart disease, gallbladder disease, cancer, high cholesterol, high triglycerides, osteoarthritis, skin problems, depression, really just everything that's going to take away the quality of your life. And diets more often than not fail. So your book makes me excited because I know that it's the mindset that needs to be changed. They say that only 10% of Americans eat a diet consistent with federal nutrient recommendations, which is outlined by the U.S. Department of Agriculture, and that the typical diet has too much saturated fat, trans fat, salt, and sugar. You must see this every day as a dietitian and nutritionist and someone who's watching what your captive audience has to eat. Do you find that the numbers in all of your training and all of your studies over the years, that's true? The people that walk through the door, do you find that it's a very large percentage just not eating right?
I see this every day. And just from a personal experience that I had, I'll share with you. I lost my stepfather to complications relating to diabetes. He was intelligent.
Type 2 diabetes?
Type 2.
Okay.
So later in life, onset due to obesity. And he was very intelligent. He was a news producer for NBC. He had all the resources he needed. He had access to his doctors. He had support system at home. He had a daughter, me, who was studying to become a registered dietitian, and I worked for Pritikin and Dean Ornish and all the gurus. I couldn't help him. I couldn't provide him the knowledge that he needed to change his behavior.
He was a smart man.
Because knowledge wasn't what he needed. It wasn't enough. And so my approach is, and I learned my lesson from that experience, that knowledge is important. Nutrition, diet, your physiologic needs, we have to look at that. But there's 3 aspects, and it's nutrition status, that's 1. We have our psychology, our mindfulness, that's 2, and health behavior. And if we're not looking at all 3 of those components, we're going to have trouble helping people.
We're going to somewhere one of the pegs will come out and everything will come crashing down.
Absolutely.
They all have to. It's that tripod effect. It's the strongest engineering possible to carry something of that kind of weight. But for to ask who would be the people at risk for poor dietary habits, a lot of times we'll think socioeconomic, we'll think cultural. The idea that your stepfather was. He was like
affluent, white, educated, everything. So
he too was at great risk because the relationship to food changes for everyone. It varies from bad habits to, like you're saying, behavioral eating to eating disorders. And a lot of times, having done some research on my own, I'm shocked at I always, the 2 you always hear of are anorexia and bulimia, but the idea that eating disorders can also be compulsive overeating, food ritualization, abuse of sugar or carbohydrates, avoidant or restrictive dieting. I mean, it goes on. The list is very long and varied, but we often don't think of being disordered in our eating when we do things like compulsively overeat. We've seen it for years in the media. Oh, that girl, she breaks up and she eats a whole vat of ice cream because, but I mean, if we have those tendencies, these are the things that lead to really just poor nutrition. And we've now taken what from birth was probably Maserati level vehicle and shoved the poor fuel and the wrong oil and then we come to a certain point in our lives where, we started with all the tools to have the best possible vehicle to transport us. And we've now, for whatever reasons, have come to these poor dietary habits.
So you would ask, who's at risk? And when I look at, from a public health perspective, Americans and the American diet, who's at risk? Every single one of us is at risk. If you live in the United States, you're at risk because the social environment, the culture, supports a completely different diet than what our bodies are meant to be consuming. And I'll just cut to the chase. I'm talking about the best diet for us would be something like a Mediterranean diet. But very few of us have adopted that.
And we certainly have the resources to have those kind of foods, but we don't adopt that.
Right. We have great marketing. And, that has a huge impact.
There's a huge impact. I can tell you when I was a little girl, I came from the era of the space race. I was just old enough to watch the lunar landing as a little kid. And I'll tell you what, I wanted Tang and I wanted space sticks and I wanted all the things the astronauts were eating because I thought, oh, this is my future. We didn't have that in our house, but it was a marketing thing. And then growing up, the idea that, and it is true, we are inundated with advertising, we're inundated with imagery and the socialization of food where we get together. And I think really anthropologically we're wired for social eating, but I don't think we're wired to eat the way we eat when we get together now. I mean, once upon a time, our ancestors, that's what they did. Tribes got together and groups of people got together and you celebrated or you commiserated or you celebrated the hunt or the harvest. But now it's harvest every day because there's fast food on every corner. And I have to think for myself, I know when I was young, not having a lot of money, the cheapest food was fast food. I could go and for a couple of bucks, and feel relatively full, and that would get me to that next step. Following something like a Mediterranean diet, walk me through that for the person listening, maybe not knowing what that is.
Okay, so I'll go back, I'll give you a little biochemistry, which is that our bodies tend to do well with fat in the diet. Protein too, carbohydrate within moderation. But specific kinds of fats we do very well with, and those are our polyunsaturates and the monounsaturates. And that would be olive oil, flaxseed. And the studies are showing that to restrict monounsaturated fat is not necessary. In fact, it's protective. But when we're looking at weight management, obviously you don't want to drink a bottle of olive oil because of the caloric levels, but it's very healthy.
I understand Sophia Loren has a tablespoon of olive oil every night before she goes to bed.
And that reduces inflammation.
Yeah.
There was a study recently reduces risk of breast cancer, and not just the foods, but the oil itself. So how do we help the public to integrate those kind of oils without creating more of a problem with excessive weight due to, the caloric density of oil? But that's part of the Mediterranean diet. We also have emphasis on fresh fruits, vegetables, beans, and animal byproducts are okay, cheese within moderation. And then the lower chain, the proteins that are lower on the food chain. So fish, poultry, and very small amounts of red meat. Mm-hmm. But what I like about it is that you can eat anything in moderation with the goal of focusing on the fats that are the better fats and the healthier fats. And we know that that affects not just cancer, autoimmune conditions. And it does help with the weight management too, especially if somebody has insulin resistance or they're on their way to diabetes, which is probably, if 2/3 of the population is overweight or obese, 2/3 of those people probably have insulin resistance. So a diet that's a little bit higher in protein and fat, that population does better with than a high carbohydrate diet. Still eating carbs, but
the good carbs.
From fruits and vegetables.
Right.
That's a Mediterranean diet. It sounds more sophisticated than it actually is. But that's what's recommended, and the studies are showing that kind of a diet works.
Right. And what happens a lot of times is when we start thinking, okay, we've got to change our diet, then all of a sudden we get into that restrictive eating and but moderation is not restriction. Moderation is not saying no to, the birthday cake or saying no to the celebration food, or it's just, but your everyday, the way you eat, what you put in the engine is incredibly important. For a lot of individuals, I see it over and over, especially in the SoCal area where we've got people very mindful of being on camera or doing that next project or just fitting in with the other mommies in yoga pants, and because that's in every area in Southern California. A lot of times it's just the pressure of what's going on around you to stay thin, and I see the restrictive eating, and I see the skipping meals and body dysmorphia, and it's like, okay, wait, now we're getting into a whole other problem than just what we're putting into our body. Again, we're talking today with Jessica Schulman. She is a PhD. She's an author, credentialed registered dietitian, nutritionist, lactation educator who holds a doctorate in health behavior and recently has completed her master's degree in clinical psychology. She's got 2 books, one that I've started and absolutely love called Relational Nutrition, The Psychology of Attachment and Eating Behavior. The second one is Nutrition in Sickness and Health, which I'm very much looking forward to reading. If someone doesn't realize that they're doing these things, the large amounts of sweets or high foods or high fat foods, overeating, or only living on like dietary supplements, or eating in secret and then social eating, oh my gosh, there's so many ways we are our own destructive factors. What are some of the tests? If someone says, I think I'm pretty healthy, I think for the most part I'm good, what are a few of the tests they could go in to sort of start to determine whether or not they truly are nutritionally healthy?
There's so many different tests or evaluations you can do, starting with the biochemical blood work. You can talk to your doctor and request a fat panel, lipid panel. You can, and I think this is really crucial, looking at insulin levels, because by the time you're diagnosed with diabetes, it's too late to prevent it. And I think that a lot of people are walking around with insulin resistance and they can't figure out why they're not losing weight. And they're being told that they are, sloth and lazy, and they're not. They're really trying. But dietary intake and exercise is not enough for people that have insulin resistance. They need additional help. They have a meal and soon after they want to eat something else. And you look at them and go, it's compulsive overeating. You have a psychological problem. Well, they may have that as well, but it can be hormonal. Insulin's a hormone, and it does a fantastic job of packing away fat. That's what it does. So if your insulin levels are high, you're going to end up developing more fat cells, adipocytes. Those are going to fill up and you'll make more, and you're hungry. You feel like you're starving because your insulin level's too high. So I think that's a crucial one to check. And that also interferes with, there's a hormone called leptin. And if you're not familiar with that one, it's really what it does is stops us from eating. It sends a message to the brain, you've had enough. Insulin interferes with leptin. So you've got high insulin levels, you're going to be hungry all the time.
Jerk.
Leptin's not working.
Well, we need leptin to work.
So
how do we help leptin?
How do we help it? That's a really good question. And if you have the answer,
okay.
let me know. But that's kind of the cutting edge.
But the insulin has that effect. It's the thing. I mean, if we can maybe get that in check, maybe this is
absolutely, and we can. So if you, and this happened to a family member, I'll reserve her name, but she came to me literally yesterday and said, "Help." My husband, his weight's going up and down. I'm really sick of it. What's his problem? And I said, wait a minute, what's going on? His belly's getting fat every time it goes to his belly. That's a sign of insulin resistance. And I said, I don't need, she says, he won't get his blood checked. You said check his insulin levels and his lipids, and he won't do it. And I said, I don't need it. I just know by looking at him so that he's insulin resistant. I can just tell he's hungry after meals. He keeps gaining weight. So another test, so we have our biochemical, the blood work, but you can also go to a dietitian and have your it's called anthropometrics, where we do your percent body fat, your BMI. We can measure your girth measurements, and there are certain places on the body that are associated with insulin resistance, and that tends to be around the middle. So if you see, typically with men, they have that apple shape, their legs are thin, and they have a lot of weight around their center. They're probably on their way to insulin resistance and diabetes. So that's another thing that we can check. And then there's also something I was just certified to do, and I'm really excited to use it, but insurance doesn't cover it yet, and that's nutrition genomics. So we'll have to talk about that another time.
Nutrition genomics.
But what I can do is see if you're metabolizing certain micronutrients, let's say folate. So if your body isn't absorbing folate, I can literally have you spit into a cup and look at your saliva, send it to a lab, and they'll tell us.
I have to tell you, I am actually excited about that, because this is something that has been around for a long time and has not been for years recognized by the medical community, and it now is recognized by the medical community because they're realizing there are messages and markers to get from this test.
Absolutely, and there's a few of them, and every few months the company that does this, and hopefully it'll be more integrated into the healthcare system soon, but they will pick up another micronutrient. So right now there's just a few, but folate is so crucial in preventing spina bifida. So we can give women prenatals, and we can give them a bunch of folate and say that's all you need. But maybe somebody that's not metabolizing and absorbing folate needs a lot more. And if they could just spit in a cup and see if they can
determine that that's something to add.
Absolutely, and prevent spina bifida just by coming to me, we spit in a cup, we send it to the lab. They may need much higher levels of folate. The same is true with folate is associated with heart disease too.
When we come back, we will talk more about a few more of the tests and things you can do through a dietitian, through your doctor, to kind of find the optimum levels for your nutrition, your healthy eating. Again, we're talking with Dr. Jessica Schulman. We'll be back in just a little bit. You're listening to Dr. Proctor here from noon to 1 every Thursday. We're going to do a little bit of business, come back, and introduce a second segment where we'll talk a bit about some of the complications, treatments, and how you can integrate a little more of this healthy eating into your diet. Here on your hometown station, AM 1220, KHTS.